The rig is moving at 70 miles an hour down a slick stretch of interstate, the siren tearing through the 3 a.m. darkness like a buzzsaw. Inside the box, the fluorescent lights are harsh, unforgiving, washing everything in a pale, clinical white. You are wedged between a jump seat and a steel stretcher, your knees bruising against the metal grating, your gloved hands slick with someone else's desperate reality. On the stretcher is a man whose name you do not know, whose history you do not know, but whose spirit is snapping in real time right under your palms. The monitor is screaming, a high-pitched, relentless alarm that cuts through the rumble of the diesel engine. The blood pressure is crashing. The heart rate is a chaotic, jagged mountain range across the screen. You are watching a human being hit the absolute bottom of the physical and spiritual canyon. This is the front line of the war. This is the raw, bleeding edge of the world that the comfortable, polite society refuses to look at. And as you pump oxygen into his failing lungs, you realize something terrifying. You realize that the same chaos, the same fracture, the same terminal velocity pulling this man apart on the stretcher is mirroring the silent, invisible collapse happening inside your own mind. You are the medic, the savior in the uniform, the one authorized to stop the bleeding. But underneath the Kevlar and the protocols, you are drowning in a private war with addiction. You are saving a life, while your own identity is being hollowed out by a chemical hunger that you cannot control. This is not a theoretical exercise. This is the exact architecture of wreckage. If you are here for a polite, soft-spoken life coach sermon, you are in the wrong room. This is the extraction. This is for the ones who have kicked down every door in the dark, searching for a way out, only to find the cold, vibrating static of a system that lied to them. We are going to look under the hood of the human machine. We are going to look at the wiring. Because the collapse you feel, the noise in your head that never stops, the addiction that feels like a parasite feeding on your spine, it has a physical address. Deep inside the architecture of your brain, there is a complex web of neural pathways known as the default mode network, or the DMN. Picture it as a massive, constantly humming server farm located in the midline of your brain. The DMN is the storyteller. It is the region that lights up when you are not doing anything specific, when your mind is just wandering, when you are daydreaming, thinking about the past, or projecting into the future. It is the part of you that constructs your sense of identity. It takes every memory, every failure, every triumph, every trauma, and stitches them together into a narrative that you call me. In a healthy brain, the DMN allows for self-reflection. It helps you understand where you fit in the world. But we are not talking about healthy brains. We are talking about the meat grinder. When you experience severe trauma, when you spend 15 years answering emergency calls, seeing the worst things humans can do to each other, feeling the wet, heavy weight of mortality on your hands day after day. The default mode network does not just record the event. It gets fundamentally disrupted. It gets hijacked. Stress hormones flood the system, chemically altering how these brain regions connect. The storyteller goes rogue. Instead of integrating the memory and moving on, the network gets stuck on the traumatic loop. The DMN becomes a skipping record, constantly replaying the worst moments, the failures, the blood, the terror, the shame. It constructs a new identity for you, an identity built entirely out of pain and unworthiness. It whispers that you are broken. It whispers that you are dirty. It whispers that the world is a threat and you are defenseless. And when the noise in your head becomes a screaming, deafening roar, you look for a way to turn the volume down. You look for anesthesia. You turn to the bottle. You turn to the needle. You turn to the pills. You introduce a chemical into the system to force the machinery to shut the hell up. Let's look at the mechanics of this descent. Let's look at what addiction actually does to this network. When you introduce the substance, you are altering the resting state functional connectivity of the DMN. The front part of the network, the anterior DMN, which is responsible for emotional regulation and assigning personal value, starts to power down. Its connectivity decreases. You lose the ability to regulate your feelings. You lose your self-awareness. Meanwhile, the back part of the network, the posterior DMN, which directs your attention inward, goes into overdrive. It becomes hyperactive. This is the anatomy of the trap. Your emotional regulation is offline, and your internal rumination is dialed up to a 10. You become a prisoner in your own skull. You obsess. You ruminate. You replay the negative emotions, the guilt, the craving, over and over and over. The default mode network becomes a landing strip for every spiritual parasite, every dark thought, every self-destructive impulse. The addiction stops being a choice and becomes a biological imperative. The DMN disconnects from the executive control networks of your brain, the part of you that makes rational decisions, the part that weighs consequences, the part that knows the drug will destroy your family, your career, your life. That part is locked out of the control room. The craving takes the wheel. The substance is no longer a way to get high. It is the only way to survive the crushing, unbearable weight of your own hijacked mind. I want you to picture the reality of this. Picture the addict sitting alone in a dim room. The shades are drawn. The floor is littered with the debris of a collapsed life. Empty bottles, burned foil, unpaid bills, the physical artifacts of a soul in retreat. The phone rings, but they do not answer, because the voice on the other end belongs to a world they no longer inhabit. Inside their brain, the default mode network is a storm of electrical static. The ego, the pride, the fear, they all fuse together into a heavy, suffocating armor. The world calls it a disease. The world calls it a moral failing. The world wants to put you in a sterile room and hand you a checklist. But the checklist does not reach the DMN. The checklist does not silence the static. This is where the polished, comfortable systems fail. The soft sermons and the bubblegum therapies do not have the kinetic force required to shatter a calcified default mode network. They try to treat the symptom while the parasite is deeply embedded in the host's neural architecture. So how do you break out? How do you escape a prison that is constructed out of your own brain tissue? You do not do it by fighting. You do it by dying. You do it by total, absolute, unconditional surrender. This is the core of what we call sovereign sanity. It is the moment the rope snaps tight. Look at the science of spiritual awakening. Researchers who map the brains of individuals undergoing profound spiritual experiences or entering states of deep, transformative meditation observe a very specific, undeniable phenomenon. The default mode network quiets down. The hyperactivity ceases. The relentless, grinding narrative of me, the ego, the pride, the self-referential obsession, is significantly subdued, and in some cases completely transcended. The borders of the self dissolve. The rigid, traumatized pathways loosen, allowing different regions of the brain to communicate fluidly without the obstruction of the ego's filter. This neurological event mirrors the exact spiritual process of surrender. It is the moment you finally stop trying to control the uncontrollable. It is the moment you lay the ego on the floor, in the back of that ambulance, or on the floor of that dim room, when you have burned through every lie, every excuse, every drop of false power. You hit the bedrock. You hit the absolute zero of human capacity. You realize that the identity you have been defending, the title, the habit, the pride, is exactly what is killing you. Surrender is not a passive, weak act. It is a violent, surgical removal. It feels like tearing off a layer of your own skin. It is the agonizing process of letting go of the steering wheel while the car is careening toward the cliff. But in that exact fraction of a second, when you truly, deeply yield, when you accept the complete loss of self, the DMN powers down. The static stops, and what floods into that empty space is a peace that defies all medical, logical, and psychological explanation. It is a physical weight in your chest. It is the sovereign rope. It is a grounding, absolute knowing that overrides the chaos. When the brain's narrative center steps back, you experience a profound mental clarity, a sense of unity with something infinitely larger than your own broken story. You realize that the wreck, the 15 years of war, the trauma, the addiction, it was never a punishment. It was the brutal, necessary extraction of every substitute. It was the fire required to burn away the false scaffolding so that the true foundation could be poured. Let's look at the legacy of this surrender. Walk into the life of someone who has actually survived this extraction. They do not walk with the arrogant swagger of the ego. They do not operate on the frantic, anxious frequency of the world. They move with a quiet, lethal neutrality. They have been through the meat grinder and come out the other side. When the crisis hits, when the world panics, they are the ones standing still, watching the rope. Their brains have adapted. Their default mode networks have been rewired. They no longer interpret every external event as a threat to their identity because they no longer fiercely defend that identity. They have handed it over. They have achieved sovereign sanity. They face a world that calls them crazy. The comfortable society, the ones still desperately clinging to their jello foundations, cannot comprehend the peace that sits in the middle of a total loss. They label the surrendered soul delusional, because to admit that this kind of radical, stripped-down peace is possible is to admit that their own ego-driven lives are a frantic, exhausting illusion. They want you back in the noise. They want you back on the bottle, back in the breakdown, so they can feel normal again, but you do not move when they speak. You do not flinch when they judge. You do not follow feelings, schedules, or opinions. You move only when the rope pulls. This is the reality of the garden. It is a place of raw, unflinching truth. It is where we expose the micro-hooks of self-glow that try to pull you back into the DMN's trap. We document the exact architecture of this freedom, because the ones still tasting the burn need a map. They need to know that the static can be broken. They need to know that the parasite can be starved. The king is still on the throne. The trauma changed your blueprint, yes. The addiction hijacked your wiring, yes. But the surrender rewrites the code. The surrender brings the system back online, not as the broken machine it was, but as a completely new instrument. Stay sober. Stay neutral. Keep your eyes on the rope. The session is active, and the work does not stop. If this hit the bone, send it to someone who is still fighting in the dark.